Ever get that feel like you're dreaming something and you just know you've been there before?
Oh, yeah,
Or a story, completely new story, but it feels strangely familiar?
definitely, yeah.
That right there, that's what we're diving into today. We're talking about the collective unconscious.
Ooh.
Yeah, but hold on. Before you switch that dial thinking, oh no, not this woo-woo stuff again, we're not talking about like mystical mumbo jumbo. We're going deep with Carl Jung. He's the one with this theory about a universal library of human experience. We all supposedly tap into it.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So less about actual mind reading, more about
Not mind reading.
it's more like
Um,
fiddle.
it's well, like those stories, symbols, those character types that just keep popping up.
Across all different cultures and times.
Exactly. Humanity's greatest hits, but playing on a loop in our subconscious.
One of the sources we looked at even called it the mind's cloud storage, which I thought was such a great analogy.
Yeah, totally. I mean, with cloud storage, we access it, but we don't really control what's in there. And Jung's saying it's kind of the same with the collective unconscious. We're talking about this huge reservoir of images, symbols, even these patterns for how stories are told. And these patterns, they show up everywhere across cultures and throughout history.
Exactly. It's not just random stuff floating around either. It's really powerful stuff. Think about it. You see these similar creation myths, flood myths, all these recurring themes in completely different cultures that had no contact with each other.
Yeah. Now, fast forward to the biblical story of Noah's Ark. On the surface, they seem similar, right? A chosen dude gets a heads up about this massive flood, builds an ark, saves his family, grabs a bunch of animals.
Two of each.
Two of each, exactly. You know the story. But here's where it gets interesting. The Mesopotamian version, it's all about the whims of the gods. Like, they decided to flood the world on a whim.
Right.
The biblical story, though, frames it as divine punishment. Same catastrophic event, two totally different cultural flavors, but both tap into this primal fear of, well, utter destruction. But there's hope too, right? The hope for renewal.
That's fascinating. So it's not about every culture having the exact same story, more like these echoes of shared human experiences are woven into different narratives.
You got it. It's like variations on a theme.
Okay, I'm with you. So if this collective unconscious is the library, what are we actually reading in here? What's on the shelves?
Oh, the good stuff. That's where archetypes come in. These are like the blueprints for the characters.
The characters we see in these universal stories.
You know it. Recurring patterns of behavior. Jung believed they're imprinted on our psyches.
He saw that as a major piece of the puzzle. It's like humanity is working off the same underlying source code when it comes to the psyche. And those recurring themes we're talking about, it's like they're programs, software programs, we're all running on some level, and those programs shape how we see the world.
Okay, so speaking of programs or like blueprints, the source materials also mention something called archetypes and how those play a role. Can you break down for me what exactly are archetypes? Where do they fit into all of this?
Okay, so think of archetypes kind of like universal blueprints, but instead of for buildings, they're blueprints for our experiences, the stories we tell, even our personalities. An important thing to remember is that they're not actual people, but more like these fundamental models for certain roles or energies that we see popping up again and again.
Okay, that's helpful. Can you give me an example of an archetype we see a lot?
Sure, take the hero, for example.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about like Superman or Wonder Woman. Think about ancient myths, Hercules, King Arthur, You see that same pattern of someone going on a journey, facing challenges, overcoming obstacles, and then coming back transformed. Those stories, they still resonate with us. You know why? Because on some level, they're tapping into this innate human desire for growth, for transformation, for conquering. It's like the hero's journey is the collective unconscious in its most elemental form.
So it's not just that we enjoy reading those stories, it's like they're speaking to something deep inside us that we all recognize.
That's it. It's primal. And this goes beyond just heroes, though. Think about like the wise old man or the great mother. You know those archetypes that represent wisdom, guidance, nurturing? You see them everywhere. Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, Dumbledore in Harry Potter, even in how we view our own parents or mentors in real life.
It's true. So are you saying those gut feelings we have, like if we instinctively trust a certain type of authority figure, could that be the collective unconscious at work too?
It's definitely one way to think about it. We tend to project those archetypal qualities onto people we meet, which is why understanding them can be so helpful. But this whole collective influence thing, it isn't just about nations and heroes and stuff. It's in our stories, our myths.
You know, when I hear myth, I think Zeus and lightning bolts and all that. Am I oversimplifying things?
Not at all. Greek mythology is full of archetypal imagery. But Jung saw myths in a much broader sense, almost like society's dreams. Dreams that are packed with symbolism. And that symbolism, it reveals our collective hopes, our fears, these fundamental truths about being human.
So it's almost like instead of analyzing one person's dream, we're analyzing the dreams of whole cultures. That's
Mhm.
kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Right. And just like with dreams, myths aren't meant to be taken literally. Take that hero's journey we were talking about earlier. It's not about literally slaying a dragon, right? It's about confronting the metaphorical dragons in our own lives, our self-doubt, our deepest fears, all that stuff. There was this scholar named Joseph Campbell. You might have heard of him. He really popularized this idea.
Oh yeah, Joseph Campbell, the hero with a thousand faces guy, right. So he was actually drawing on Jung's work, even if most people don't realize it.
Exactly. That book is basically a deep dive into how that hero's journey shows up over and over in different cultures and time periods. It's the collective unconscious in action, just presented in different ways. It's fascinating.
It really is. So even if we're not like consciously thinking about Greek myths every day or reading Jung, are you saying these archetypes are still at work, still shaping us through the stories we're exposed to?
Absolutely. I mean, look at the stories we're drawn to today. Movies, books, even video games. Think about it. The whole superhero genre, what is that?
Yeah.
But our modern mythology.
Oh, wow. Yeah, when you put it that way, it's kind of mind-blowing. So Iron Man, Black Widow, all of them, they're tapping into those same archetypes that have been around for centuries.
Exactly. It's the same stuff, just different packaging. We're still hardwired to be captivated by stories of good versus evil, underdogs overcoming the odds. It's like proof that this isn't just some irrelevant theory from 100 years ago. This collective unconscious thing, it's alive and well, just, maybe wearing a different costume these days.
I like that, the collective unconscious in a new outfit. That's a good visual. But I have to ask, how does all this actually help us, like in our day-to-day lives? Is this just fascinating trivia for parties, or is there a more practical application here?
That's a great question. It gets to the heart of why I think Jung is still so relevant. He wasn't content with just analyzing these patterns. He actually believed that becoming aware of them, like really understanding how they work within us and how they play out in the world around us, that's how we gain real self-awareness.
So less about, oh, that's a shadow archetype, and more about using it as a tool for deeper self-understanding. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Like imagine if you realized that your tendency to butt heads with your boss, maybe it's connected to a certain archetype.
Yeah.
Or your love for those cheesy rom-coms. Maybe that speaks to this universal longing for connection that we all share. It's not about labeling ourselves. It's about understanding on a deeper level why we think and feel and act the way we do. So when we say hero, we're not just talking Superman or Wonder Woman.
Ding, 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 we have a winner. It's bigger than that. It's
Right.
that deep down desire we all have to face a challenge, fight for something more, maybe even slay a few metaphorical dragons along the way, right?
Love that. And it's everywhere.
Everywhere. You see it in the athlete pushing their limits, the single parent juggling everything, even that friend who always speaks their truth no matter what. It's that inherent hero within.
And it's not just those big, epic archetypes either. I feel like we all know a wise old man type.
Oh, tell me about it.
Even if they're not literally ancient and living in a mountaintop cave.
Right. Maybe they're just like your neighbor with really good life advice.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Recognizing these archetypes isn't about like pigeonholing ourselves or others.
Right.
It's about understanding those patterns that are already there,
Yeah.
deeply ingrained. And honestly, that can be a powerful tool for growth even.
Oh, 100%. Like, are you the one your friends always come to for advice? Always lending an ear. Maybe you embody aspects of the caregiver archetype.
Interesting.
It's like you're holding up this mirror to your personality, but instead of your reflection, it's an ancient myth staring back at you.
I like that.
Yeah.
So we've got the library, we've got the archetypes. What about the stories themselves?
Ah, you're thinking like a true deep diver. All right, so buckle up because we're heading into myth territory now.
Get me.
Have you ever heard of Joseph Campbell?
Yeah, vaguely.
Okay, so Campbell's big thing was this idea of the hero's journey. It's this narrative structure, right? And get this, it pops up in myths all over the world. And it resonates because it's tapping into something universal, this longing for adventure, for transformation, for finding your place, you know?
And that doesn't really change, does it? No matter what time period, what culture, it's all about finding your place in the world.
Exactly. It's amazing how these ancient stories still have this hold on us. Like you can see the hero's journey everywhere, from the classics to like the biggest blockbuster movies. We're still drawn to those same patterns.
It's like our collective unconscious is giving those stories a big thumbs up.
Right.
And that brings us to a pretty important archetype, the shadow.
The shadow. Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. What exactly is the shadow?
Well, everyone has one.
Yeah.
It's those parts of ourselves that we try to hide, the parts that we deem unacceptable, undesirable. But here's the thing. Jung believed that facing our shadow is absolutely crucial for growth.
That makes sense. I mean, you can't really grow if you're hiding from parts of yourself, right? How do we even begin to do that? To face our shadow, it sounds kind of, I don't know, intimidating.
It can be, for sure, but it's also incredibly freeing. And it all starts with just acknowledging those shadow aspects, our fears, our insecurities, even things like anger or jealousy,
Yeah.
right? Those are the parts of ourselves that we might project onto others or try so hard to bury deep down.
So, like, if I'm always criticizing someone for being dishonest, maybe it's because I'm struggling with my own feelings of inadequacy or dishonesty.
Exactly. The moment we shine a light on those shadow aspects, we can begin to integrate them into our conscious personalities. Now, this doesn't mean we just let those negative traits run wild, but it does mean understanding their roots and how they're influencing our behavior.
So it's not about, like, defeating our shadow. It's more about making peace with it. That's really interesting.
It is. And that process of integration, of bringing those hidden parts of ourselves into the light, that's actually a big part of what Jung called individuation.
Individuation. You keep using that word. What does that actually mean in this context?
Okay, so it's not about like becoming self-centered or closing yourself off from others. It's actually the opposite.
Hmm.
Individuation means taking all this knowledge about the archetypes, about the collective unconscious, all of it, and using it to become the most authentic, the most complete version of yourself that you can be.
Hmm.
It's about recognizing those universal patterns,
Yeah.
but then figuring out what makes you you.
So we're all connected by these shared patterns, these archetypes. But individuation is about finding your own unique path, your own way of expressing those patterns.
Exactly. And think of the archetypes as like tools to help us on that journey. Once we're aware of them, we can start to see them playing out in our lives,
Mm.
how they influence the choices we make, our relationships, even our careers. Like maybe we're over-identifying with a certain archetype, or maybe there's an aspect of ourselves represented by another archetype that we've been neglecting.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance within ourselves.
I'm really starting to see how this all connects now. It's not just some abstract idea, it's actually incredibly powerful stuff. And it can make a real difference in how we live our lives.
It really can. And that's the beauty of Jung's work. It bridges that gap between those ancient stories, those myths, and our modern lives. It reminds us that we're not just these isolated individuals running around. We're part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
So we've gone pretty deep here, talked about a lot, but I always want to make sure we bring it back around.
Make it practical.
Exactly. How does understanding this, the collective unconscious, actually help us live our lives day to day?
That's the million-dollar question. Well, I think, for one, it pushes us towards self-awareness.
Okay.
Think
Yeah.
about it. Ever feel stuck, like you're in a rut?
Oh, all the time.
Could it be that you're caught in an archetype, playing out an old pattern without even realizing it?
Well, wow. Never thought of it like
Yeah.
that.
Because once you see that, once you're aware of the script you're following, you can choose to do something different. You can improvise.
Oh, I like that. It's empowering.
Right. And on a simpler level, just realizing that these struggles, these archetypes, these stories, they've been around forever.
Like we're not alone in this.
Exactly.
I love that. This whole deep dive has been amazing, really eye-opening. But I think if there's one thing I want listeners to take away, it's that it's not just about knowing the theory, right? It's about actually spotting those archetypes, those universal stories, playing out in our own lives.
You said it. It's about asking yourself, what archetypes do I see in myself? Which ones am I drawn to? And how are those patterns showing up in my relationships, my work, even my dreams?
Ooh, our dreams, right? That's something to sleep on.
Lots to unpack there.
Isn't there? If our dreams are like messages from the collective unconscious, what are yours trying to tell you? That's something to ponder. This has been an incredible conversation. We've covered so much ground. But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We talked about all these different archetypes today: the hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the great mother. So here's a little homework assignment. If you had to pick just one archetype that you feel most connected to right now at this point in your life, which one would it be and why? Don't overthink it. Just go with your gut. You might be surprised by what comes up. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.